Welcome back to the deep dive. We're taking on something, well, pretty huge today. We're looking at just one single verse,
Just one.
but it's often called the key, the master blueprint for understanding basically all of Scripture that comes after it.
Yeah, it's a moment of enormous consequence. Think about it. Humanity has just fallen. It's catastrophic.
Yeah.
And right then, right in that immediate godly response, in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15,
Right there in the judgment.
exactly, mixed right in with the judgment, you get this first glimmer, this foundational promise of ultimate hope. It's really, and this isn't an exaggeration, it's like the entire gospel message packed into, well, an embryonic form.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is microscopic. We want to really dissect every single element, every word choice, every linguistic clue inside this one verse.
To trace that plan of redemption.
Right. The one God established right at the beginning, right after the fall.
Yeah.
We're thinking about it in four main parts, all connected. First, this guaranteed, relentless conflict between good and evil.
The setup.
Then, the promise of a specific champion, like one individual.
Crucial distinction.
Third, the paradox, right? How this champion wins through suffering. Not despite it, but through it.
Yeah, that's often missed.
And finally, the absolute certainty that the enemy, Satan, is ultimately totally defeated. Irreversibly.
And for you listening, getting this verse right isn't just, some academic exercise. It sets the pattern.
Yeah, the pattern for everything.
For every conflict, every prophecy, every historical twist, every promise you see unfold from Genesis chapter 4 all the way to Revelation, it really gives you the lens to view history itself.
Okay, before we get into the Hebrew nitty-gritty, let's just pause on a weight of this moment. I want you to think about this. When you're making a really massive commitment, like something life-altering, maybe writing a will, or a founding document for a nation, or even a formal treaty.
Something intended to last.
Exactly. What do you do to make sure that promise, that commitment is totally understood, that it can't be easily twisted generations later?
You use formal language, specific language.
Maybe even poetic language, right? The structure itself has to communicate authority, seriousness.
Absolutely. And that brings us right to the structure of Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. This was no off-the-cuff remark. Not at all.
It wasn't just God thinking out loud.
Definitely not. The way it's constructed, the linguistic architecture, it proves this was a formal, intentional, authoritative, godly decree.
Yeah.
It's not just telling a story, it's written using sophisticated Hebrew poetic elements.
Okay, poetry in Genesis. Tell us more.
Well, you see standard parallelism, which is common, but the really striking thing here is the use of a chiastic structure.
Chiasm. Okay, let's focus there for a second. For anyone not familiar, a chiasm is like a literary mirror, right? An ABBA pattern.
That's a good way to put it, like bookends.
It's a clever way to draw your attention right to the middle, to the core message. So how does that pattern look here in Genesis 3.15? And, why does that structure even matter?
It maps out perfectly.
Yeah.
It really defines the battle lines with such clear intention. Let's break it down. The A part is the source of the conflict. I will put enmity between you and the woman.
Initiating it.
Right. Then the B section names the fighters. And
Yeah.
between your offspring and her offspring, the two
Your
sides.
collective lines.
Then you move inward
Yeah.
to the absolute core, the B prime section, the main action. He shall bruise your head.
The decisive blow.
And finally, the A prime section mirrors that first part, but describes the cost involved. And you shall bruise his heel.
Wow. So the structure itself, this ABBA pattern, it emphasizes that central clash between the two seeds.
Yes.
And critically, that action, the bruising, it just underlines that God is speaking here with immense prophetic authority, calculated intent.
Exactly. This isn't just story time. It's like a cosmic structure being built right before our eyes.
Yeah.
The literary sophistication, it signals this is the formal declaration of war and, crucially, the declaration of the eventual winner. It's like a godly contract setting the terms for all of human history.
Okay, to really feel the weight of that, we need to place it in its original world, right? The ancient Near East, the ANE. Because while the meaning goes way beyond any one culture, God often uses patterns in language that people back then would have immediately recognized.
Absolutely. That's key to understanding how it landed initially. Think about victory through a champion. That idea was everywhere in ancient cultures.
Right, like settling disputes with one representative fighter.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Civil disputes, border skirmishes, even big wars could be settled by representative champions. It wasn't just, a thing they did sometimes. It was a deeply understood cultural and military practice.
And the go-to example for most of us is probably David versus Goliath, right? from 1 Samuel chapter 17.
That's the perfect illustration. David, just one guy, steps up. He represents all of Israel, and he fights Goliath, who embodies the entire Philistine threat.
The outcome of their one-on-one fight decides it for everyone.
Exactly. And Genesis 3.15 sets up that exact same pattern for the ultimate spiritual war. One individual, the woman's seed, will fight the serpent, who represents his entire kingdom. Decisive, representative combat.
Okay, let's talk about that word seed. Zerah in Hebrew. Promises about ascendance, about a seed, were pretty common for kings back then, weren't they? Especially in covenants, these royal seed promises.
Oh, very common. Lineage, dynasty, that was everything.
So what makes this promise here about the woman's offspring so radically different, so structurally unique?
Well, the shock factor, is that the promise comes explicitly through the woman, not the man.
Which would have been jarring back then.
Hugely jarring. In those heavily patriarchal societies of the A&E, promises of kingship, lineage, inheritance, they always ran through the male line. The father's seed, period. So to have the solution, the champion, explicitly routed through the woman, well, it strongly hints, structurally, prophetically, at something supernatural about this champion to come.
Huh. It's like a structural clue baked right into the very first promise, setting the stage, maybe, for conception that bypasses the normal male line, like the virgin birth, but millennia beforehand.
That's exactly how many see it. It telegraphs that this champion isn't just another human king, he's different.
It's a quiet clue, but loud if you know the context.
Thunderous disruption of cultural norms, yeah. Designed to make you sit up and pay attention to how extraordinary this seed will be.
Okay, let's touch briefly on the serpent symbol itself, because snakes in the A&E, their symbolism was kind of all over the place, wasn't it?
It really was. Complex, often contradictory. You can't just map modern ideas onto it. In places like Egypt, Mesopotamia, serpents were loaded with meaning.
Like what?
Well, they could represent wisdom, cunning, but also magic, the underworld, chaos. Often, they embodied the enemies of cosmic order.
Okay.
Tell home some Babylonian myths, the chaos dragon, or Apophis in Egypt, the giant serpent trying to swallow the sun god Ra every single night, a persistent cosmic enemy.
So people back then were very familiar with this idea of a powerful serpent-like enemy.
Oh, absolutely. It was terrifyingly familiar. But here's the genius of Genesis. It takes that chilling, familiar image, but it demythologizes it.
What do you mean demythologizes?
It means the serpent in Genesis isn't just some random mythological chaos monster. It represents a real, specific, spiritual intelligence. Satan himself, the adversary, the deceiver.
So it grounds the conflict in reality.
Exactly. It anchors this spiritual war in actual history, not fable. It gives the enemy a name, a nature, a strategy. It's not just chaos. It's personal, intelligent evil.
Okay, structure, context, characters, that's a solid foundation. Let's dive into the first actual phrase of the promise, the divine initiative. And I will put enmity.
Yes, this is critical. Who starts this fight? The key terms here are eship, for I will put, it's a causative verb. Meaning God actively establishes this conflict. He doesn't just predict it will happen. He declares he's causing it to happen. It's his action.
Okay, and the word for enmity.
That's Aba. And it doesn't just mean dislike or disagreement. It means deep-seated, absolute hostility, irreconcilable hatred, total opposition.
Wow. So what's the huge theological takeaway from God saying, I will put this deep hatred?
It's massive.
Oh, right.
First, God creates the conflict, not us, not Satan. God initiates the separation. And second, critically, this has to be seen as an act of grace.
Grace? How is starting a conflict grace?
Because if fallen humanity were just left to ourselves, spiritually speaking, we'd naturally drift towards the deceiver. We'd ally with the one who flatters our sinful desires. Sin doesn't naturally hate evil, it's drawn to it. God has to intervene supernaturally to inject this active Iba, this hatred for the darkness, into the heart of the woman's potential offspring. He prevents a total willing alliance with evil.
I remember we talked about a WWII analogy before, like how Allied forces in occupied countries had to actively create resistance movements. The locals didn't just automatically fight back. They were often passive, maybe even complicit out of fear or self-interest.
That's a great analogy.
Outside help was needed to spark resistance. Fallen humanity needed that same kind of outside godly intervention, that active implanting of Iba to even begin to resist the spiritual occupier.
That analogy works really well because it also helps address a potential challenge, doesn't it? If God actively puts this enmity there, why do so many people seem completely untroubled by sin? They seem totally at peace with godlessness, no internal struggle visible at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. If the enmity is put there by God, shouldn't everyone feel it? Is it always active?
Well, I'd suggest the enmity is always present as a potential, a capacity given by God. But it seems to require active maintenance, like a fire that needs tending. When those in the line of the woman's seed start to drift, when apathy creeps in, that abah, the active resistance, it weakens.
So it can be ignored or
Yeah,
suppressed.
exactly. The Bible constantly warns against spiritual sleepiness, drifting, complacency. God's a shit creates the ability to resist, but our human choices, our lack of engaging with truth, our neglect, it can effectively quench that resistance. So maybe apathy, that lack of struggle, is actually the sign that the God-given Iva is being ignored or even actively suppressed in someone's life.
Okay, that reframes it. So that internal battle that so many people do feel, the one Paul talks about in Galatians chapter 5, verse 17, for the desires of the flesh are against the spirit, and the desires of the spirit are against the flesh.
For these are opposed to each other, to keep you from doing the things you want to do.
That struggle is actually the daily echo of this Iba that God established way back in Genesis 3.15. It's proof it's still active.
Precisely. It confirms the conflict is real and ongoing.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's look at who this enmity is initially, between you, the serpent, and the woman.
It's really striking, isn't it, that God focuses the promise right on her, on Eve. She was just deceived. She was the first to eat the fruit.
Yeah, the primary instrument in the fall, you could say. But the term the woman here likely refers not only to Eve as an individual, but also points towards womankind generally.
Mm.
She represents the source, the line, through which the promised seed will eventually come.
And we talked about the contrast with Adam, right? He was held ultimately responsible as the federal head, sinned knowingly.
Yes, and placing the solution explicitly through the woman, again, highlights that necessary supernatural element we mentioned. It points away from the standard human lineage, hinting again at something like the virgin birth, meaning the champion won't inherit Adam's corruption through the normal male line.
And if you look through the rest of the Bible, this conflict plays out very personally, doesn't it? Satan seems to specifically target the female line, the line carrying the promise.
It's a clear strategy of the enemy, yes. He knew the promise hinged on the woman's seed. So you see these constant narrative battles. Think about Sarah versus Hagar.
Right. The promised seed through Sarah, threatened by Ishmael through Hagar.
And Paul even uses that later as an allegory for the two covenants in Galatians chapter 4, verses 28 through 31. That shows how foundational that conflict was. Or think about all the times evil kings in the Old Testament tried to wipe out David's royal line, often targeting queens or female descendants.
Ophelia trying to kill all the royal heirs.
Exactly. And even the grand cosmic picture in Revelation chapter 12. You have the woman clothed with the sun, pursued relentlessly by the dragon, Satan. It's showing this persistent, ongoing spiritual warfare aimed specifically at those who carry the promise of the champion.
The stakes couldn't be higher. Okay, moving to the next part of the verse, we zoom out a bit from the individuals to the clash of entire spiritual kingdoms and between your offspring and her offspring.
Right. And here we need to really understand that word zera again, offspring, seed, descendants. It's a bit fluid in Hebrew.
How's
Context is king. It can mean a whole group of people, a collective lineage, or it can narrow down to one specific individual descendant. And here in Genesis 3.15, it kind of does both. It starts collectively, defining these two opposing lines that run all through history, but it ultimately funnels down to one specific individual.
Okay, let's define those two lines. First, the serpent's offspring or the serpent's seed. We need to be really clear. This is not about biology or ethnicity. Right?
Absolutely not. Critically important. The serpent's offspring are defined spiritually. They are the followers of the enemy. Those who, whether they realize it or not, buy into Satan's lies, use his methods, pride, deception, violence, and live in rebellion against God's ways.
What are their hallmarks?
You see it right away.
Yeah.
Pride, deceit, violence, especially aimed at the godly line, and just a general spirit of godlessness, historically. Look no further than Cain.
The first murder, brother against brother.
Exactly. Cain murders his righteous brother Abel. Then you have Lamech, boasts to get his violent revenge. They exemplify that spirit immediately after the promise is given.
And that line, that spirit, continues throughout the Bible.
Oh, yes. The characteristics stay constant. Think of the builders of Babel, united in arrogant defiance of God. Later, figures like Pharaoh actively trying to destroy God's people, the carriers of the promise, through violence.
Ordering the Hebrew baby boys killed.
Right. Or Herod, centuries later, trying to murder the infant Jesus, the ultimate seed. They all embodied the spirit of the serpent's offspring, actively opposing God's redemption plan by attacking the promised line.
Okay, so that's one side. What about the other side, the woman's offspring?
Again, defined spiritually. These are the ones who trust God's promise, who live by faith, seeking to obey him. Their characteristics are the mirror image of the other side. Humility, seeking peace, valuing truth, striving for godliness.
And the examples start right away, too.
Immediately, Abel, whose offering was accepted. Seth, who carried the line forward. Noah, finding grace. Abraham, the father of faith. David, the king after God's own heart. And eventually Mary, the mother of the ultimate seed. It's this constant underlying struggle between these two incompatible spiritual lines, woven through every single page of history.
It reminds me of that American Civil War analogy we mentioned earlier, but on a spiritual plane. It wasn't just about isolated battles, it was a fundamental clash between two opposing systems, moral, spiritual, that simply couldn't coexist peacefully.
That analogy captures the collective conflict really well. The ongoing struggle between God's kingdom and the kingdom of darkness is constant, yes, but the real genius of Genesis 3.15 is how it pivots from that collective conflict to the individual.
Okay, so the war rages between the two lines throughout history, but the ultimate focus narrows.
Precisely. While the collective war is the backdrop, the ultimate resolution, the victory, hinges on one specific sira, one individual seed.
How does the text itself signal that shift from the collective offspring to the singular he?
It's right there in the grammar of the very next phrase. While zira can be collective, the pronoun used in the next clause forces the interpretation. It says, he shall bruise your head. That pronoun, hu in Hebrew, is explicitly masculine singular.
So it grammatically points to one specific male descendant.
Exactly. It definitively shifts the focus from the many descendants to the one ultimate individual champion who will win the decisive victory.
Okay, that transition is key. It sets the stage for the climax of the verse. Let's move into that fatal exchange, the very heart of the promise, starting with the decisive victory. He shall bruise your head.
Right. Now we're focused entirely on the individual champion. As we just said, the Hebrew pronoun is hu, masculine singular, undeniably the specific Messiah from the woman's seed, and the action verb shuf. It means to crush, to strike powerfully, to bruise. But in the context of the head, it implies a mortal, decisive blow.
And the target is the head, rodish in Hebrew.
Yes, universally understood is the seat of life, intelligence, control. A vital organ. Striking the head isn't like striking the hand or foot.
In any fight, ancient or modern, a crushing blow to the head is usually fatal. Game over.
That's precisely the significance here. This promised crushing of the serpent's head represents complete, total, irreversible victory over Satan's power, his authority, his ability to rule and deceive.
And this victory is presented as certain.
Absolutely certain. It's a promise, not a possibility. It's not conditional on our performance. And it's substitutionary, this one. Champion fights and wins for the many who belong to the woman's seed. But crucially, it's presented as a future victory, promised right here in Genesis, but its fulfillment lies ahead.
We see foreshadowings of it later, right? Preparing people for the real thing. David crushing Goliath's skull in 1 Samuel 17.49 feels like a direct echo of this.
A perfect type, yes.
Yeah.
It illustrates the concept beautifully. But the ultimate cosmic fulfillment is, of course, Jesus Christ.
Where do we see him fulfill this head crushing?
Think about the key moments. His decisive victory over Satan's temptations in the wilderness, recorded in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. He overcomes the deception right at the start. Then the ultimate crushing blow happens in two stages, really.
The cross and resurrection.
Exactly. The cross might look like defeat, but Paul describes it in Colossians chapter 2, verse 15, as Christ disarming the spiritual rulers and authorities, putting them to open shame by triumphing over them. He broke their power to accuse and condemn.
So the cross was the decisive battle won.
The strategic victory, yes.
Yeah.
And the second stage, the resurrection, is the public demonstration of that victory. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 54 through 57, celebrates it as the final defeat of death itself, which was Satan's ultimate weapon. Head crushed, power broken.
Okay, head crushed. Total victory for the champion. But the prophecy immediately follows with the cost. And you, the serpent, shall bruise his heel. It uses the exact same verb, shuf, bruise or strike, but applied to a totally different body part. This paradox seems central.
It's the absolute hinge of the whole promise. The serpent, addressed as you, Atah, will strike the champion's heel, Akweb. Now, the heel is an extremity. It's important for movement, but it's generally not a vital, life-threatening spot like the head.
Right.
Using the same verb, shuf, for both actions, but targeting such different body parts, The head versus the heel, that's the literary brilliance, it sets up a stark contrast in outcomes.
A bruised heel?
Yeah.
That's painful. It can make you limp, maybe bleed, might temporarily disable you, but it doesn't usually kill you. It doesn't end the war.
That's the crucial theological point. It signifies real, intense suffering for the champion. The pain is genuine, the injury is real. But it's not permanent defeat. It's not death without return.
So victory comes through this suffering.
Precisely. Not by avoiding suffering, but by enduring it. It's a temporary wound that leads to eternal victory. And it speaks again to substitution. He takes a painful wound for us, allowing us to avoid the fatal blow to the head.
That contrast between the mortal head wound for the serpent and the non-mortal heel wound for the champion is stark.
It really is. Think about ancient combat. If your enemy suffers a fatal head wound, the fight's over. You win. But here, the victor also suffers damage.
We have to stress that difference. You know, the Achilles myth involves a heel wound being fatal, but that's not the picture here for the Messiah.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
a key difference. The Messiah's heel wound, his suffering and death on the cross was devastatingly real, incredibly painful. But it was not permanent. It was followed by the resurrection. The wound was temporary.
So the crucifixion was Satan's attempt to deliver that shove, that crushing blow to the champion's heel.
It was his best shot. It looked like victory for darkness. The heel was definitely bruised.
But that appearance of victory, that bruising of the heel, was actually the very mechanism God used for the ultimate head-crushing defeat of Satan.
Yes. The suffering was required. The wounds were real. The darkness seemed to win for 3 days. But that temporary setback, the bruised heel, was precisely what fulfilled the conditions for the permanent, head-crushing victory over sin and death. It's this profound paradox of godly power. God wins through apparent weakness, through suffering, through death leading to life.
Which brings us neatly to the wider theological implications. We've just done a deep dive on one verse, but it reveals this fundamental reality, doesn't it? The reality of spiritual warfare that really defines our whole existence.
Yeah, synthesizing all this,
Yeah.
the conflict described here isn't just, psychological struggles inside our heads. It's not merely sociological trends or political clashes, though it affects all those things. The Bible insists this is a real conflict involving real spiritual beings. Satan, his demonic forces, and it shapes all of human history, right down to our personal daily experiences.
That explains a lot about the world.
It really does. It explains the universal pull towards sin, that inherent resistance to godly truth we see everywhere.
And the primary battleground. He said it's not just out there.
No, the primary battlefield is intensely personal. It's human hearts and minds. The weapon system is fundamentally truth versus deception. And our stance, faith or unbelief, alignment with God's truth or Satan's lies, determines which seed, which kingdom we're serving.
But crucially, while our choices matter, we aren't the ones who win the war.
Absolutely crucial reminder. The final victory belongs solely to the godly champion, Christ. Our efforts don't secure the win. Knowing that frees us from that crushing pressure of trying to be perfect, trying to win the war ourselves.
I think the most compelling part for me is the method of victory, this idea of victory through suffering. It's such a powerful paradox.
It is. It's the defining characteristic of God's way versus the world's way. The godly way overcomes evil not by brute force or inflicting pain, but through self-sacrifice, through bearing the consequences deserved by others. It's love conquering hate through costly service. Well, it often looks completely foolish from a purely human perspective.
Death leading to life. Humility leading to exaltation.
Exactly. And that pattern, that paradox, isn't just in Genesis 3:15. It echoes throughout the entire New Testament, showing the incredible unity of the Bible's message right from the start.
Like Paul talking about strength being perfected in weakness in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9.
Right. Or Jesus himself teaching in John chapter 12, verse 24. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Life comes through death.
And Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11, the great hymn about Christ humbling himself even to death on a cross, and therefore God highly exalted him.
That's the pattern. Humiliation precedes exaltation. Suffering precedes glory. This ancient promise in Genesis sets the template for how God accomplishes redemption all through history.
Okay, we've gone deep into the verse. Let's bring it home. For you listening right now, what's our role in this ongoing ancient conflict? How does this apply?
Well, the first thing, and maybe the most liberating thing, is to remember, you are not the champion. You're not the Messiah. Your victory, my victory, it depends completely on Christ's finished work, his head-crushing victory on the cross and resurrection.
That takes the pressure off, doesn't it?
Immensely. It frees us from trying to earn salvation or achieve perfect redemptive obedience on our own steam. We get to serve God out of gratitude and security because the victory is already won, not out of fear of failure. We rest in his work.
But resting doesn't mean being passive, right? We are still part of the woman's seed, part of that line. Our actions still matter in this conflict.
That's absolutely right. We're not the champion, but we are part of his army, part of the seed. Our choices, our daily lives, they matter because they demonstrate which line we belong to, which kingdom we represent. When we choose humility over pride, truth over lies, forgiveness over revenge, we are living out the character of the woman's offspring, the children of the promise.
So, practically speaking, then, how does understanding Genesis 3.15 change how you live Monday to Friday? How do we actually live as part of the woman's offspring?
I think it starts with a daily, conscious recognition that this spiritual conflict is real. It's not theoretical. Then we have to be discerning, evaluate the ideas, the messages, the information bombarding us constantly.
Mm.
Does it align with God's revealed truth, or does it echo the serpent's deception? Because deception is still his primary weapon.
Be alert.
Be alert, but it's also deeply practical. We need to engage actively in faithful community. Surround ourselves with other believers, others who are part of the woman's offspring. We need each other to stand firm, to encourage each other, to sharpen each other. Collective resistance is vital.
And if we really grasp that we're in a spiritual battle, then we should probably expect some conflict, shouldn't we? If God put enmity there, then facing opposition, maybe even persecution for our faith, shouldn't shock us. It doesn't mean God's abandoned us.
Not at all. In
Yeah.
fact, it might mean the opposite. Following Christ faithfully naturally stirs up opposition from the kingdom of darkness, precisely because we bear the identity of the champion that Satan hates. So if you face pushback, resistance, maybe even hostility when you try to live truthfully, humbly, lovingly, understand that's the heel getting bruised. That's the eyeball in action.
It helps make sense of why godly values sometimes face such puzzling hostility in the culture.
It does. It prepares you mentally. These aren't just random difficulties. They're often skirmishes in the larger war.
So when our heel gets bruised, when we face that opposition, how should we respond? What are the weapons for this fight?
We absolutely must use spiritual weapons for a spiritual war. Earthly tactics, anger, manipulation, returning evil for evil, they don't work and actually play into the enemy's hands. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18 lays out our godly armor. Truth, righteousness, the gospel of peace, faith, salvation, the word of God, and prayer.
Relying on God's resources.
Completely. And the crucial mindset shift is this. We fight from a position of victory, not for victory. Christ has already won the decisive battle at the cross. Our struggles now are about living out that victory, holding the ground. He's already taken. Knowing the end game changes everything about our endurance and our hope.
That identity piece is so important than knowing who we are because of this ancient promise.
It's foundational. Paul in Galatians chapter 4, verse 28 calls believers children of promise, directly linking us back to this Genesis hope. We inherit the promises made to the ultimate seed, Jesus Christ. That identity gives us unbreakable security, deep purpose, and a hope that transcends whatever circumstances we face.
And our mission flows from that identity.
Yes. Part of our role is to help others see which seed, which kingdom they are currently following. We do that by demonstrating the character of the godly line in our own lives, and by clearly sharing the gospel message, the good news that reveals Christ as the victorious champion who offers rescue and adoption into his family.
So bringing it all together for everyone listening, the ultimate connection point is our union with Christ, right?
That's the heart of it, because through faith we are united to Christ, in Christ. His victory, legally and spiritually, becomes our victory. His head-crushing work means Satan's fundamental authority and power over us is broken. We live secure in that achieved reality.
Even though we still feel the tension, we still experience the conflict day to day, the heel still gets bruised in the world around us and in our own lives.
Yes, that's the tension of living in the already but not yet. Satan's defeated, his head is crushed, but he's still thrashing around, lashing out. He continues striking at Christ's heel by attacking his people, the church, through trials, temptations, deception, division, opposition.
But his power is ultimately broken.
Fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
His final doom is certain. We live in that period between D-Day and V-Day, if you like. The decisive blow was struck at the cross and resurrection. The final sentencing and removal will happen at Christ's return.
So every struggle you face, listener, every time you resist temptation, every choice you make for truth or love, every bit of opposition you endure for Christ's sake, it actually has eternal significance. Your future is as secure as God's unbreakable promise right back here in Genesis 3:15.
Absolutely. It gives meaning, validation even, to how hard it can be sometimes to live a godly life in this fallen world.
Yeah.
You're not fighting some forgotten, pointless battle. You are living out the glorious implications of the greatest victory ever won, secured by the champion himself.
Wow. We started with just one verse, Genesis 3:15. And we've traced its structure, its ancient context, the conflict it established, and its ultimate resolution through all of history and theology. It really is the cosmic blueprint.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And the fact that God laid out the whole plan, the need for a champion, the certainty of conflict, the necessity of suffering, and the guarantee of victory right there immediately after the fall, it just shows the depth of his compassion and the absolute certainty of his redemptive plan.
His victory is our victory.
His victory is our victory. We live secure in that triumph he already achieved for us.
Okay, here's a final thought for you to chew on this week, something to take away from this deep dive. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15 isn't just the first gospel promise. In a very real sense, it is the gospel in its entirety. Every single essential element of salvation, the problem of sin and Satan, the need for a godly redeemer, the certainty of spiritual conflict, the requirement of suffering leading to ultimate victory, it's all there, packed into seed form, just waiting to grow and blossom through the pages of Scripture until it reaches full flower in the person and work of Jesus Christ.
And that seed started to sprout almost immediately, which leads us perfectly into our next deep dive. We'll see this promise, this conflict between the two seeds, clash tragically with reality in the very next chapter. We'll look at the first clear, heartbreaking example, the story of Cain and Abel in Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 to 16. Join us for that next time.